Hi, this is Topher with OS Training. In this series, we're going to take a look at a plugin called Give. The purpose of this plugin is to streamline the process of fundraising, to make it easy for people to give money on your website. Fundraising plugins deal with many of the same problems as e-commerce plugins. Money is changing hands, you need SSL security on your site, things like that. We'll go over each of the options that you need to take care of to make sure this works smoothly. We're looking here at the home page of the Give plugin. You can see that it is also on Wordpress.org. The plugin itself is free. There are things you can buy, but you could easily use only the free version and start accepting donations immediately. There's a nice video here on .org and a nice listing of features. Goal tracking per form, zero commission charges, own all your own donation data, accept single, custom, and multi-level donations, and a whole bunch of other things. Here on their website, you can see that same video, as well as some other options. Here are just a few of the featured add-ons that you can pay for. These are different ways to accept money. PayPal comes with it out of the box. The PayPal you see here that you can buy is the PayPal Pro gateway. If we go to the top, we can click on Add-ons and see everything. There's Constant Contact for email marketing, the Braintree gateway, Dwala, Stripe, MailChimp, WePay, which is very popular, PDF receipts, and some more. I recommend the Stripe gateway if you're going to spend money on anything. It's $62 one time, but Stripe is one of the easiest and most delightful payment gateways that I've ever worked with. Working with them will just make the whole process much smoother. Since it can be found on WordPress.org, let's install it real quick. Upon installation, we're shown a welcome screen. And right away, we can sign up for the Give newsletter. Normally, I don't recommend signing up for newsletters for things because then you end up with an inbox full of newsletters and you never end up reading any of them. But Give is adding features quite regularly. And if you want to be kept up to speed on what new things that you can have access to for free, I recommend signing up for it. They have an excellent documentation area. You can see it here. Something interesting to note is that Give is actually a fork of Easy Digital Downloads, which is an e-commerce platform. So if you're familiar with Easy Digital Downloads, Give is going to feel very, very comfortable for you. In our next video, we'll take a look at how to configure it and start accepting donations. Now that we have Give installed, let's take a look at some of the setup. On the left is a Donations menu item. Let's go right down to Settings. And as I mentioned before, this is based on Easy Digital Downloads, so this should look very, very familiar. Right at the top is an option for Test Mode. I recommend leaving it in test mode until you're really ready to start accepting real money. That way, if you make any mistakes, the impact is much, much less. But don't forget to take it out of test mode when you are ready to accept money. Otherwise, your transactions won't get you anything. Here is a list of the pages that Give wants to use. There's a success page, a failed transaction page, and a donation history page. Now, Give created these pages for us when we installed it, and you can see them here under Pages, right here. And so you really only need to change these if you want to build your own pages. I don't really recommend it. They're fairly simple, and it's just a headache if you want to mess around with it. You can choose a base country, a currency position, a thousand separator, and a decimal separator. Next, we'll look at payment gateways. Out of the box, Give comes with PayPal Standard and Offline Donation and Test Payment. Test Payment doesn't actually ask for any payment information, so that's what I use while I'm setting up a site, because then I can test it without having to enter in a fake credit card every time. Offline Donation is for things like checks or cash in an envelope. And then there's PayPal Standard. If you're comfortable with PayPal and you like it, then you can begin immediately using it. Now, because PayPal Standard is not checked, it's not actually usable on my site. So if someone were to try to give right now, they would not see PayPal as an option. If I check it, then PayPal becomes an option. You can choose a default gateway. I don't recommend you have more than 1 or 2 gateways available to people. Otherwise, it just gets confusing. People don't know the difference between Authorize.net and Stripe and PayPal and all those things. PayPal's pretty recognizable. So I would choose either PayPal and one other, or only the one other. If you use Stripe, it simply asks them for their credit card information. They don't care what processor you're using. I'm going to leave Test as the default right now. If you're going to use PayPal, you'll need to enter in some information here. Your PayPal email, a style page if you wish to, and then what type of transaction this is. Read this information carefully. PayPal has some very specific rules about donations, and before you start accepting donations through PayPal, you should really understand all of their policies. And then lastly, there's an option to disable PayPal IPN verification. It says if donations are not getting marked as complete, then check this box. This forces the site to use a slightly less secure method of verifying donations. It's slightly less secure, but not really insecure, and it works. So you want to leave this unchecked if you can, but check it if you need to. And then here we have some options for the offline donations. This lists the instructions on how to mail a check, and then it's possible to send an email with this information as well. For display options, you can optionally disable the CSS which comes with Give. I don't recommend this. They put a great deal of work into it, and it looks pretty sharp on almost every theme. However, if you know what you're doing and you want to really restyle it all, you can simply turn off all the default CSS with this. And remember the welcome screen we saw when we first enabled it? We can choose to deactivate that welcome screen so that if you're activating and deactivating Give fairly regularly, you don't see that screen every time. For the post types and taxonomies, I'm going to come back to that in a later video because it'll make a lot more sense once you see what's going on. Give can send a variety of emails, and this sets up an email template. There's a default and a plain text. If you choose default, then you can optionally include a nice logo at the top, the from name and the email, and then there's a donation email receipt. This thing I highlighted is called a template tag, and right down here is a list of all the template tags you can use, and it will simply print in this email the proper information for that template tag. And then we have donation notification emails, and that is going to go to the people listed in this box. By default, it's the site owner, but you can make it anyone. Then down here, you can optionally disable admin notifications. When someone gives, a session variable is installed in their browser so that when they come back, the site knows who they are. Then they can view their receipts without having to log in. You can choose how long that session should live. A week is the longest. You can optionally remove all data on uninstall. This would wipe out any campaigns that you had and give you a completely fresh install. I can't really think of a reason why you would want to do this, unless you mess things up really badly and you really need to start over. And lastly, you can disable the content filter. It says if you're seeing extra social buttons, related posts, or other unwanted elements appearing within your forms, then you can disable WordPress's content filter. and there's a link to learn more about that. And lastly, there's a page to get you your system info. This is for your server, not your desktop machine or your laptop. You probably don't need this information unless something goes wrong and you ask for support from the Give team. Then they will probably ask you for this information. And there's a button right here, so you can click and download it as a text file. That's it for the settings. In our next video, we'll take a look at building some forms and accepting donations. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to build a basic fundraising form with Give. We're looking here at the All Forms list, and we have none because we haven't built any yet. So let's click Add Form. And we'll give it a title. Now the first question it asks is if we want a set donation or a multi-level donation. We're going to choose set, and we'll do multi-level in another video. And the question is, would you like this form to have one set donation price or multiple levels? And we'll set the donation level. Let's make it $10. The way it is now, people can give only $10. No more, no less. If we click Custom Amount, then we have a little text box. And if we leave it empty, it will say Give a Custom Amount. But we have the option to say anything we want here. I'm going to leave it empty and go with the default. And then we can choose to set a goal. I'm going to choose Yes. And we'll say we would like $100. And then we can choose the progress bar color. Here we can choose to put in some text above or below the form. I'm going to choose No for now, and we'll do some in the advanced form. Payment fields we can show on page, reveal on click, or a modal window upon click. We'll leave show on page for now. Then there's a button that they have to click in order to donate. By default it says Donate Now. We'll leave it at that. Default gateway. You may recall in the settings we chose a default gateway and it was Test. Here we have the option of choosing something else for this one, or just leave it at the global default. I'm going to leave it at global default. We have the option to disable guest donations. That means people would have to be logged into the website in order to give. And that's great for a membership site or some kind of private site. But if you're just trying to raise money from the general public, you don't want to check this. You can choose to show a form for people to log in, which would fit great if you disabled guest donations. But since we didn't, we're going to leave this at none. And then we can choose to customize offline donations. If we click Yes, then we can override many of the things that we set in the settings area. I'm happy with what we left there, so I'm going to choose No. And we have the option here for terms and conditions. If you say yes, then you can make a checkbox that says Agree to Terms, and then put in your terms. And then they can't give unless they agree to them. I'm going to leave that at No. Then we have an excerpt, which is the normal WordPress excerpt, and the author. Those aren't really related to Give, so I'm going to leave them empty. We can set a featured image. I'm not going to right now so that you can see what it looks like without one. So now I'll hit Publish. You'll note here a shortcode. You could take that and use it any place shortcodes work in WordPress. I'm going to leave it right there for now, though. Now there are two different ways to view this form. One of them is to simply view it directly. And there we are. Now this is called a single donation form. Here we have the featured image, and I didn't set one, so there's a placeholder. You could put anything in there. The building you're trying to build, the child you're trying to support, or whatever. Here's the title, the amount raised, the progress bar, the total amount, the choice of payment method, and then personal info. If we were not in test mode, it would also ask for our credit card information right here. So we could change this to $20 if we wanted, because we allowed that in the settings for this form. So I'm going to click Donate Now, and you can see what happens when there are some empty fields. Now I'll click Donate Now again. And now I have gone to my donation confirmation page, you can see here at the top. Now while we're here on the basic form, I want to show you a few things. I'm going to go back to Settings, and Display Options, and here we have Post Types. Disable Form Single Views. We could make it so that this form would not be visible here. We would have to embed it in a page. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. We could also disable form archives and excerpts. And then right here we can disable form featured image. I'm going to check that. And then we can disable categories and tags as well. So I'm going to click Save Settings and reload this form. And now we don't have a featured image. From a fundraising standpoint, I highly recommend you have an image. People are drawn to pictures, and they're more likely to give. Now, something else I'd like to show you is a variety of options related to this personal information. I'm going to edit my form. And here for payment fields, we have Show on Page. Let's choose Reveal upon click, and it adds a new button. Let's update and reload. And now the form looks like this, much more compact. And when you click Donate Now, it's revealed. Now the other option was Modal Window upon click. And we'll reload. And again, we have a very basic form. And when we click Donate Now, we get this. All three of these work exactly the same way. Your choice of which one to use depends entirely upon your personal taste, upon the taste of your donors. I would recommend doing some testing. Try each of them on different days and see which days you get more donations. One more thing I want to show you before we move on to the next video. Here on the list of forms, you can see the price, the goal, how many donations there have been, and the income. Now, you may recall that I filled out the form, but because we were in test mode, it did not apply that money to this campaign. That means you can test all you want without messing up your campaign and then go live and start at a fresh zero. Now, I mentioned earlier that there were two ways to view this form. One is to look at it directly like this. Another is to embed it in a page. We'll say basic form page. Change our template to default and we'll hit publish real quick. There, now we have a vanilla page. And right here at the top is add donation form. You can choose the form you wish and insert it. And then hit update. And now we can view this page. Note there's no featured image here. That's because this theme doesn't print the featured image that way. But I can click Donate Now, and it acts exactly like my other form. But another difference is that I don't have a progress bar on this one. So whether you want to embed your forms in a page or look at them directly like this is entirely up to you. They both work equally well. In our next video, we'll take a look at how to make a more advanced form. Now that we've built a basic form, let's take a look at a little more advanced form. We're going to choose multi-level donation. And for our first amount, we'll put in $10. And we'll call this the bronze level. And then we'll choose Add Level, and we'll make this one be $15. We'll call it Silver. $20 is Gold. And $25 is Platinum. There. Now we can choose how these options are going to show, and we'll go through all of them and show you what they look like, but we'll leave it at buttons for now. And we also want them to be able to enter a custom amount, and we'll leave the text at the default of give a custom amount. And we'll set another goal here of $1,000 again. And now we can choose to display some content. I'm going to put some above the form fields. And then for payment fields, these are going to be exactly the same as the ones we showed you with the basic one. I'm going to leave it at Show on Page. Then there's the complete donation text, the default gateway, disable guest donations, and we don't want register. Let's customize offline donations. Request billing information. This option will enable the billing details section for this form's offline donation payment gateway. The field set will appear above the offline donation instructions. Just to show that it's changed, we'll just change it very slightly. And then let's put in some terms and conditions. We'll leave it at Agree to Terms. And rather than 400 pages of legalese, I'm going to put in that. And now we will publish. And now let's view this form. We still didn't put in a featured image. And here you can see $0 of $1,000 raised, and our bar still isn't green because we haven't given real money. And here we could optionally put in a custom amount, or you can click these buttons to choose a different one. Now I think you might get more donations if the dollar amounts were on the buttons. So let's put those on there. Actually, we'll do just the one. There. Now let's experiment a little with the different button types. Let's choose radios. So now we have buttons like this. And then there's a drop down. And you can choose like this. My favorite is probably the buttons. But the number of options may also dictate what style you use. If you have 15 options, you may want the drop down. And also, I think it would look better with the dollar amounts on all the buttons. So now let's go back to just buttons. And there we are. $10 bronze, $15 silver, $20 gold, $25 platinum. Now, you may recall that we put in some text above, right here. You can see that right here. We also updated the offline donation options. And now you can see it's asking for billing details. And here you can see the instructions on how to mail in a check. And lastly, we chose to have terms of conditions. You can click here and see the terms. I don't see a label here, so let's go put one in. There we go. Agree to terms. So I want to choose $15, do a test payment, and donate now. And there we are. So in our next video, we'll take a look at some reporting and tracking the transactions. In this video, we're going to take a look at transactions and reports in Give. Here we can see the transactions that I have done during this series. It says at the top here, note, test mode is enabled. Only test donations are being displayed. That's all there actually are, since I've never used this as a real site. But here you can see the email, the amount, the status, the date, the user, and a link to view details. You can also optionally resend the donation receipt from right here. Let's view donation details. Here at the top we can see what form was filled out, the date and time, and the total donation. Then there's the donor's details, and I didn't fill out the billing information, otherwise it would be here. But it could be updated right here and right now. Then there are some payment notes. This is for administrators, people who have access to this page specifically. They can make notes about this transaction. This can be useful if someone calls to change their donation or has a complaint or something like that. In the top right here, we can set the status to pending, refunded, failed, abandoned, or revoked. We can change the date and time that it was submitted, and we can change the total price. Then here we could resend the receipt as well. The payment meta is some information about this payment. What gateway we're using, a custom key for this transaction, the IP of the submitter, and a transaction ID. And here's a link to view all donations for this donor. Since I'm the only one, it looks exactly like the other form. However, if we had several hundred listings, and you clicked that link, then you would see only the ones for this donor. This gets more and more useful as time goes on. You'll note at the top there's also a search and a start and end date. If you use this plugin for years, and you have dozens and dozens of forms, and you have loyal givers who give $10 every time you put something up, then it can become useful to say, I only want to search in a certain month and to see who gave then, or I only want to see a certain user to look for a pattern, or I only want to look for this certain user in this time to look for fraud. The searching can be extremely useful the more donors you get. Now let's take a look at reports. Right now we're showing income over time. Total income for period is $35, donations was 2, estimated monthly income 0, and monthly donations 0. We didn't allow for monthly donations. Now we can also choose forms. And we're showing $0 because we were in test mode. But if you were in real mode, you would be able to see the various success rates of all of your different forms and view a detailed report. We can show donors. There's only been one donor. The other list of donors that we saw listed every donation. This lists only donors with their totals. So this list would theoretically be much shorter. Here you have an option to search donors. So if you have a great many of them, it's easy to find them. And then you can look at payment methods. This is particularly useful if you have some payment methods that are kind of expensive. For example, if you use one payment method that takes a 5% cut, which is far higher than the others, and you realize that only 2 people have ever used it, you could just drop it out of your system altogether. And by the same token, if you have one that nobody ever uses, you should drop it, regardless of what it costs, because it only makes the system more complex. You can see here that we've only had 2, and they're both test payments. Now let's look at the export options we have. Right here at the top, we can generate a PDF. And Chrome just downloaded it for me. And here I am looking at it. The information isn't very different from the other forms we've looked at, but it is in a nice PDF and easy to send to people. Here we can look at income and donation stats, exported in CSV, and you can put in a date span. This is nice for pulling it into Excel or Access or something like that, and doing some math and statistical analysis on it. And you can do the same with donation history and donors. Being able to export donors is pretty significant because you may have a donors database and you may want to incorporate this information into that database. And lastly, here we have a logs tab. If there were any problems, they would get logged here. We haven't had any. There are payment errors and API requests. So these kinds of errors would come from, say, perhaps PayPal being down or Stripe being down. You would get a note in here, and it would tell you information about who tried to make the donation and when and things like that. And you could get back with those people and let them know what's going on. That's all there is for the Give plugin. It's very flexible, yet very simple and very solid. You'll want to make sure that you're running your site over SSL so that your transactions are secure. But other than that, it's very simple to set up and quite pleasant to use. If you're going to accept donations and you don't want to use a service, I highly recommend that you use this plugin. The day after I finished the Give series, version 1.0 beta came out, and it added some cool new things. So in this video, we're going to take a look at those. I'm here on WordPress.org, and I'm on the changelog tab. And right here at the top, under New, it says there's a Donors Overview page that provides a searchable list of your donors and relevant information. That's a pretty big new feature, and we're going to take a look at that closely. Something else that's cool, though, is down here under Improvement, it says all scripts are minified and concatenated into one script, and all CSS styles are minified and concatenated into one style sheet. This means that your site is going to load a little bit faster, because instead of many different JavaScript and CSS files, it's loading just one each. So let's take a look at the new stuff. I've already done the upgrade, so now under Donations, we have a new Donors tab. And here you can see the long list of donors that is me. Right here on this page, you can see the name, email address, number of donations, and dollar amount, and date created. If we click View Donor, you can see some more information here. There's a picture, and then there's an Edit Donor button, which asks for address information. Then there's a row here where you can see that the user ID is 1, and you can disconnect user. To put it simply, there is a donor and there is a WordPress user, and right now they are linked, and they are both me. You could disconnect this donor from the user and then optionally reconnect it to a different user. It's a little confusing about why you would want to do that, but the time may come when you need to. Here's an example. If someone makes a donation, it automatically creates a user for them. If they come back and they make another donation, without logging in, it'll make yet another user for them. This allows you to disconnect donors from the users and reconnect them all to a single user later. Here below the mechanism to disconnect a user, you can see how many completed donations there are. and you can see that there's $35 lifetime donations. If you click the 2 completed donations, it takes you right over to the transactions admin panel. Below that, it shows recent donations, and you can view details, and it takes you to the single transaction admin panel. And then it shows you which forms have been used to complete donations. If you only ever have one form, then it doesn't really matter. But if you have a variety of forms over time, you can see which ones people have given to. At the top, there's a section for donor notes. These are only for admin. No one outside the admin area will ever see these. And it's basically for internal use. Then there's the option to delete the customer. You have the option here to permanently delete this donor, along with all of their associated payments and records, or not. Normally you don't want to delete a donor, but given our previous scenario of one person giving twice and having it create 2 different users for them, you may want to move all of their donations to one donor and then delete the leftover donor. That's it for the new donor admin panel, but it's quite a significant addition. Managing donors is a really big deal, and having it built right in here is really nice. That, combined with the speed ups for loading your entire site all the time, make for a really nice new version.